I opened HOA financial statements. Consulting paid to Karen's cousin. One report froze their account. The first time I knew something was very wrong was a Tuesday night, 10:47 p.m., when I opened our new HOA statement on my laptop. The number at the bottom didn't make sense. Our monthly dues had quietly jumped again, and there was a shiny new line, special assessment, improvements plus consulting. My AC hummed against the Phoenix heat while I scrolled, jaw tight. I'd already watched my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, stand in the parking lot that afternoon, clutching her invoice with shaking hands, whispering, "I can't afford this again." On the screen, the email from our HOA president, Cynthia Hallbrook. Cindy glowed back at me. Financial details are handled by the board. No breakdown. No numbers. Just that. I should have closed the laptop and gone to bed like everyone else in this community does. People here work remote, juggle kids, fight the heat, and just auto-pay whatever the HOA demands. Instead, I opened a blank folder on my desktop and typed the name in plain, cold letters, HOA documents. Then I pulled our bylaws from the dusty welcome packet and started reading. Buried in the legalese, one line lit up like a flare: members' right to inspect financial records. Cindy loved to say, "If you don't like it, run for the board." I wasn't going to run for anything. I was going to file. If you've ever felt trapped by an HOA bill you don't understand, subscribe now, because this is where their story starts to fall apart, and mine quietly begins. I didn't always read bylaws for fun. I grew into it. I grew up in South Phoenix, in an apartment where the AC died every August and the landlord answered texts once a month. My mom worked nights at a nursing home and kept every receipt in a shoebox under the sink. When a bill looked off, she'd spread them on the table and whisper, "If it's not written, it didn't happen." I guess that stuck. By the time I was 34, I was the organized one at every job. I landed in payroll and procurement for a mid-sized logistics company, 40 vendors, rotating audits, surprise inspections. I lived in spreadsheets and email threads. I knew how people hid things: vague line items, round numbers, miscellaneous services. I also knew how systems reacted when the right person asked the right question with the right file attached. When I bought my townhome in Phoenix, it felt like graduation. 2 bedrooms, beige walls, gravel yard, and a pool I didn't have to maintain. The sales agent waved the HOA folder at closing. They keep everything nice and tidy here. Just standard dues. I signed, relieved. Predictable bills sounded like luxury. At first, the HOA was just background noise. Automated emails from the management company, newsletters about community spirit, and pool key replacements. I set my dues to autopay and went back to juggling vendor contracts and W-9s for work. Then came the temporary special assessment. It was framed as a one-time thing. The email had stock photos of smiling families and fresh landscaping. Short-term increase to fund critical improvements and consulting. It said, no one in my building celebrated, but no one fought either. People were tired. It's Phoenix. Everyone's just trying to keep their house under 80 degrees and their job secure. A month later, the same extra amount hit again. I asked gently at the next HOA meeting. I remember standing in that overcooled clubhouse, fluorescent lights buzzing, folding chairs scraping the tile. Cindy sat at the folding table up front, blonde hair perfect, board binder open like a law book. She loved hearing herself say fiduciary duty. I raised my hand. Can we get a breakdown of the consulting and improvements, just so people understand what we're paying for? The room went quiet. A few neighbors shifted, eyes on the floor. Cindy smiled the way people do when they smell a challenge. Financial details are handled by the board, she said into the mic. If you don't like it, run for the board. A little laugh rippled through the room. Not mean, just tired. like they'd seen this scene before and knew their role. Silence. I sat down, face hot, pulse steadying. I wasn't a fighter. I was the person who reconciled invoices at 9 p.m. and made color-coded folders. Public humiliation wasn't my sport. But later that week, I saw Mrs. Patel in the parking lot, standing under the yellow sodium light with her statement in her hand. She was in her 70s, sari tucked carefully, gray hair in a bun. Her fingers shook as she pointed at the total. They said temporary. She whispered, "Last year, then again. I already cut my medication. What else can I cut?" There are moments your brain clicks from annoyed to this is not optional. Watching her, the extra line on my own bill stopped being an irritation and started looking like extraction. At work, if a vendor tried to slip through vague charges, my job was simple: ask for documentation in writing and see who flinched. If they stalled, we paused payments. The system didn't care about feelings. It cared about records. Sitting at my little dining table with our HOA welcome packet open, highlighter in hand, I realized something. This community might be full of exhausted people, but the paper that governed it was very awake. There, in tiny font under member rights, was my doorway, the right to inspect financial records, with reasonable notice. Cindy had the microphone. She had the stage, the binder, the country club wardrobe. I had time, a scanner app, and a job that taught me exactly how ugly numbers look when they're hiding something. For a few months after I moved in, I believed the sales pitch that this HOA was just another boring layer of adult life. Pay the bill, enjoy the pool, wave at the landscapers. It almost felt true. And for a while, it did seem like we'd finally found some peace. Until that first temporary fee refused to go away, and Cindy's gentle reminders started sounding a lot like threats. The first microaggression didn't look like a war move. It came as a friendly-looking email with a stock photo of a sunset, and the subject line, gentle reminder, community dues. I was at my kitchen table, laptop open, bylaws spread out like a crime scene. I'd already highlighted the section about members' right to inspect records. I wasn't guessing. I knew what I was entitled to see. I clicked the email. "Dear homeowner," it began. "We've noticed your balance is past due to the current special assessment. Please bring your account current to avoid late fees or collection activity." Past due. I opened my banking app. Every payment was there, on time, automated. No misses, no gaps. The only thing that had changed was their number. I hit reply and kept my tone flat. Attached is proof my dues were paid in full. Please correct my account. Also, per Section 6, 3 of the bylaws, this is a formal request to inspect the association's financial records for the last 24 months. Please confirm a date within the statutory time frame. I attached the screenshot, quoted the exact clause, and hit send. An hour later, the management company replied, copying Cindy, "Thank you for your inquiry. The past due notice refers to the current special assessment. Financial details are handled by the board. We'll pass along your request." No date. No acknowledgement of my right, just that same line, handled by the board. 10 minutes after that, another email landed, this time directly from Cindy. "Naomi, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the board is extremely busy handling critical community matters. We cannot accommodate on-demand inspections for every homeowner who has questions about basic math. Please be patient. In the meantime, please ensure your balance is paid in full. Best, Cynthia Hallbrook, HOA President and Finance Chair. Basic Math." I read it twice, then opened my account portal again. A red banner had appeared at the top, "Delinquent Contact Office." They flagged me. I walked outside to clear my head. Phoenix night air is still hot, but at least it's dark. In the parking lot, my neighbor across the way, Brian, was unloading groceries from his hatchback. He nodded toward my building. "Hey, you get that nasty email too? Cindy's on a warpath," he said. "I'm just gonna pay it before they start sending those orange envelopes." "Orange envelopes?" I asked. He snorted. "Final notices. They tape them to your door like a scarlet letter. My buddy in Building D got one because he was 3 days late last year. Everybody saw it. Public shaming wrapped as policy." Back inside, I refreshed the portal again. Same red banner. Same fabricated delinquency. The message was clear. Asking questions made you a problem account. Most people would call, argue, maybe yell. I didn't. I opened a new folder on my desktop. HOA emails. I saved the past due notice, my reply, their deflection, and Cindy's condescension. Then I took screenshots of the red banner and printed them to PDF. At the bottom of Cindy's email, her signature block bragged, "Committed to transparency and fiscal responsibility." The irony was almost funny. Almost. That week, small things started to shift. The security guard at the pool suddenly reminded me twice about guest limits, even though I was alone. The landscaper, who always used to wave, kept his eyes on the ground when I walked past. At the mailboxes, 2 women from the other cul-de-sac went quiet when I approached. Then one of them murmured just loud enough, "Some people love to stir the pot." I'd seen this pattern at work when an employee questioned an expense report no one wanted to explain. First, label them difficult. Then, starve them of information. On Friday, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just the management company's logo. Inside was a courtesy notice with my name in bold. "Your account reflects an outstanding balance. Failure to remit payment may result in late fees, interest, and referral to collections." 3 sentences. No numbers. No breakdown. I turned the page over. Blank. Instead of crumpling it, I laid it flat on my table, smoothed the crease, and took a picture for my growing archive. Then I drafted one more email. "Dear Board and Management, this is my second written request to inspect the association's financial records for the last 24 months, as permitted under Section 6, 3 of the bylaws and applicable Arizona statute. Please confirm in writing a date, time, and location for inspection within the required period. I will attend with a notepad and scanner app only. Sincerely, Naomi Reyes." Lot hashtag. I CC'd myself on a different account, added a read receipt, and hit send. No emotion, just documentation. To them, it was a courtesy notice and a red banner. To me, it was their first written mistake, neatly filed and timestamped. If you've ever had an HOA try to label you delinquent just for asking questions, hit like so more people see how this game is really played, because I had no idea this was only their opening move. The social shift was small at first, like someone turning a dimmer switch. After that second records request, the HOA newsletter suddenly featured a new section, Community Harmony. Under it, a paragraph about a small number of residents spreading misinformation and creating unnecessary work for our volunteer board. No names, but the timing wasn't subtle. In the mailroom, I found 2 neighbors reading it. They glanced up, then away. One of them, Joanna, half smiled. "Guess somebody's keeping Cindy busy," she said lightly. I folded the paper, slid it into my bag, and didn't rise to the bait. I didn't need to defend myself in a mailroom. I just needed ink on paper. A few days later, the orange envelope appeared. Brian knocked on my door, holding it between 2 fingers like it was radioactive. This was taped to your door. Thought you'd want it before the whole hallway did." Across the top, in angry red font, "Final notice, delinquent account." They'd upgraded from quiet emails to hallway theater. It listed a past due balance with the special assessment rolled in, plus a notice fee. No ledger, no dates, just a bolded threat. Failure to remit may result in lien placement or legal action. I didn't rip it down in a fury. I peeled the tape slowly so it wouldn't tear, laid it flat on my table, snapped photos front and back, then slid it into a clear plastic sleeve. Outside, as I headed to my car, I caught snippets. The one always emailing the board. Saw the notice on her door. Cindy didn't have to say my name. The paper did the work for her. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere had changed. More people showed up, but the chairs were arranged classroom style, all facing the board table like a stage. Cindy arrived last, binder in hand, a stack of orange envelopes at her elbow like props. She opened with a sigh. We've had an uptick in late payments and misunderstandings about our special assessment, she said, eyes skimming the room before pausing just a beat on me. Let me be crystal clear. These fees were properly approved by your elected board. Spreading confusion only hurts the community. Someone 2 rows back muttered, then show us the numbers, under their breath. Cindy ignored it. During owner comments, I stood when my turn came. Naomi, lot, she said, voice already tightening. I kept mine calm. This is my 3rd written request to inspect the association's financial records as allowed by the bylaws and Arizona law. I've received delinquency notices instead of dates. I'd like my request acknowledged on the record. A murmur. People looked at each other. Cindy's smile thinned. The board is not required to drop everything because one homeowner wants to play auditor, she said. If you have trouble paying your assessments, that's a separate conversation. There it was. The social script, turn a records request into a moral failing. I didn't bite. My account is paid in full. I have documentation. I'm asking for the documents that support these increases. Her hand tightened on the mic. The details are complex and confidential. That's why you elected us. If you don't like it, the next election is in 6 months. Maybe you should run. A few tired laughs, a couple of eye rolls, the pressure to sit down, to let it go, pushed at my shoulders. I just nodded once. Thank you for confirming, on the record, that you're refusing a lawful inspection request. The room went very quiet. Our property manager shifted in his seat, eyes flicking to Cindy. He knew what those words meant, even if no one else did. After the meeting, the social temperature dropped another degree. At the pool, conversation stalled when I walked by. The Facebook community group, normally photos of lost cats and food trucks, sprouted a vague post from Cindy's ally. Unpaid dues hurt everyone. Please be responsible, neighbors. Comments piled up about entitled people and Karens who think they know better than the board. Nobody tagged me. They didn't have to. Every little tactic was designed to do the same thing. Make me the problem, so no one asked what the actual problem was. What they didn't realize was that each email, each notice, each public shaming attempt was another brick in the wall they were building around themselves. At work, when a vendor tried to dodge an audit, the smartest thing you could do was stay polite and keep the record growing. Systems don't respond to feelings. They respond to patterns they can't ignore. So while Cindy curated her narrative, I curated something else. I bought a cheap accordion folder and labeled each tab. Notices, emails, meeting minutes, screenshots. Every time Cindy or the management company forgot a legal phrase or added a fee with no basis, it went into the folder. On the outside, it looked like I was losing ground, ostracized, labeled delinquent with orange paper scars on my door. Inside that folder, the story looked very different because the HOA still hadn't realized. Every gossip session, every meeting dodge, every petty little notice was quietly going into a file with their name on it. The first time they tried to turn paper into a weapon, They overplayed their hand. It started with a voicemail from the management company on a Tuesday morning, all fake sympathy over a bed of legalese. "Hi, Naomi. This is Kelsey from Desert Edge Management. We've noticed a continued outstanding balance on your account related to the special assessment. Unfortunately, if we don't receive payment in full by Friday, your account may be referred to collections and additional legal fees could apply. Please call us to make arrangements." Collections, legal fees, for an amount I didn't know. At lunch, I logged into the portal. The red delinquent banner had grown teeth. A new line item appeared, collection prep fee, $95, dated that same day. They were charging me extra for the privilege of being threatened. And it wasn't just me. In the parking lot that evening, I saw an orange envelope on Mrs. Patel's door, another on a young couple's unit at the corner, stroller parked on the tiny porch. Cindy had gone from quiet intimidation to carpet bombing. I took photos of every orange envelope I passed, careful to avoid names, just addresses and dates. Same format, same fee language, same escalation. Back inside, I wrote one sentence in my notebook and underlined it. They are using fake delinquency to justify extra fees. Then I opened a new email, this time with a subject line that wasn't a request. Formal dispute of account and cease and desist on collection activity. I wrote, "Dear Board and Management, this letter is to formally dispute the accuracy of my account, specifically the alleged past due assessment and any related fees, including the collection prep fee added on today's date. Attached are bank records confirming timely payment of all regular assessments. Additionally, per Arizona law and Section 6(3) of our bylaws, I again renew my request to inspect the association's financial records for the last 24 months, including but not limited to 1. General ledgers, 2. Bank statements, 3. Invoices and contracts related to the current special assessment and any consulting expenses, and for board minutes approving such expenditures. Please confirm in writing that no further collection activity will be pursued on a disputed amount and provide available dates for inspection within the required time frame." I CC'd myself, blind copied a personal backup, turned on read receipt, and hit send. The response wasn't an answer. It was an escalation. The next day, a thick white envelope arrived by certified mail. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. "Dear Ms. Reyes, our firm represents name of HOA. We have been informed of your repeated failure to pay lawfully assessed amounts and your ongoing attempts to disrupt association operations. If your account is not brought current within 10 days, the association may record a lien against your property and pursue all remedies available, including foreclosure of the lien." They'd upgraded from orange paper to lawyer letterhead. I read it twice, breathing slow. No ledger, no numbers, no acknowledgement of the dispute or of my right to see the records they claimed justified all this. At the bottom, in smaller font, was their tell, "This communication is an attempt to collect a debt. Any information obtained will be used for that purpose." In collections work, there's a line you don't cross. You don't pursue debt you haven't substantiated, especially when it's an active dispute. You don't ignore statutory inspection rights. You definitely don't threaten foreclosure over a contested special assessment that doubled out of nowhere. I didn't call the lawyer. I didn't plead or yell. I took out my accordion folder, opened a new tab, and labeled it Attorney Correspondence. I slid the letter in, then drafted my reply. "Counsel, I acknowledge receipt of your letter dated date. As you are now involved, please be advised that I dispute the validity of the alleged debt in its entirety. Enclosed are records showing all assessments paid when due. Additionally, this will confirm that I have made multiple written requests under Arizona statute and the association's bylaws to inspect financial records related to the special assessment and consulting expenses. Those requests have been ignored or refused. Until such time as the association provides the requested documentation and corrects my account, any further collection threats will be documented as potential violations of state law and reported to the appropriate agencies. Sincerely, Naomi Reyes. No threats, just a promise of documentation. I printed, signed, and sent it certified, return receipt requested. The green card came back 3 days later, their signature a little crooked. Another piece of paper for the file. That week, the pressure campaign spread. A new notice appeared on the community bulletin board. Delinquent accounts increase everyone's costs. Underneath, a line about a very small number of owners creating administrative burden and legal expenses. Someone had drawn a little frowny face in the corner. In the Facebook group, a board ally posted, "Friendly reminder, if you don't pay, the rest of us do." So tired of people gaming the system. Comments poured in, "Preach, so disrespectful. They should be forced to sell." No names. But after the lawyer letter, I knew exactly who the villain in their story was supposed to be. They thought more pressure would make me crack, write a check, and apologize. Instead, watching them stack illegal threat on top of illegal threat, something finally clicked all the way from "this is wrong" to "this is systemic." If they were willing to send foreclosure language to me, someone who kept every receipt in color-coded folders, what were they doing to people like Mrs. Patel, who just saw big words and bigger numbers and panicked? I looked at my notes, the letters, the orange envelopes, the certified mail. They're not just sloppy, I wrote at the bottom of the page. They're reckless. It was the day I accepted that they weren't going to stop on their own. If I didn't do something beyond emails and meetings, they'd keep pushing fees and fear until someone actually lost their home over a made-up balance. That was the moment the game changed in my head, from defending myself to building a case. And once I crossed that line, I stopped asking politely and started documenting for an audience that scared them a lot more than one difficult homeowner. Drop a comment if your HOA has ever tried to bully you with bogus legal threats, because that lawyer letter was the sign I needed that it was time to escalate far above Cindy's pay grade. I used to think my superpower was making payroll balance on the first try. Turned out it was something quieter. I knew exactly which gears inside a system made noise when you pressed them. The lawyer letter was the last time I reacted emotionally. After that, I treated the HOA like a messy vendor I'd been assigned to audit. Step 1 was simple. Stop playing the please respond game. I printed my dispute email, the attorney letter, my certified mail receipt, and the bylaws page about records inspection. I laid them out on my table, side by side, like pieces of a puzzle. The pattern was obvious. They weren't just rude. They were ignoring black and white rights in their own governing documents. At work, when a vendor stonewalled, we had a protocol, escalation outside the relationship. You don't argue, you loop in the entity they're afraid of. So I spent a Saturday morning doing what Cindy clearly never imagined any basic homeowner would do. I read. I pulled up the Arizona revised statutes on my laptop. I searched planned communities, association records, penalties. The language was dry, but I'd lived in worse. I highlighted the section that mattered most, the one that said members could inspect certain financial records, and that an association that refused could face a civil penalty per violation. Then I checked who enforced it. That led me to a state regulatory division with a clunky website and a tiny file a complaint link buried 3 clicks deep. I bookmarked it and didn't touch it yet. I wasn't ready to push that button, not without making sure if they open a file, it would be airtight. Next, I looked up our HOA's corporate registration with the state. 2 minutes and $10 later, I had their annual report. Officers listed statutory agent dates. There it was in black and white, Cynthia M. Holbrook, President. Same legal entity name as on my orange notices. No wiggle room. I poured coffee, opened a fresh document, and wrote at the top, HOA, timeline, date of first temporary assessment. Date it quietly continued. Date of my first email asking for a breakdown. Dates of each record's request. Date of the delinquent flag. Date of the orange envelope. Date of the lawyer threat. On the right, I added a second column, violation/issue. Next to some, I wrote failure to provide records. Next to others, threat of collections on disputed amount, fee with no basis, possible misuse of special assessment funds. Looking at it like that, in clean rows, something inside me relaxed. This wasn't chaos. It was just data. The last piece was figuring out where the money was actually going. We hadn't seen the statements yet. That was the whole fight. But the bylaws and state law didn't just give me the right to look. They gave a process, written request, reasonable time, defined scope. They'd already blown their reasonable time. Every stall email, every snarky line from Cindy about basic math turned from an annoyance into evidence. I stopped thinking, they won't let me see, and started thinking, they are documenting their refusal for me. That night, instead of drafting another angry paragraph, I opened a new email, short and clinical. Dear State Division name. I'm writing as a homeowner in HOA name regarding repeated refusals by the association to comply with Arizona law on records inspection and to report potential misuse of special assessment funds. Attached is a timeline and supporting documents. Sincerely, Naomi Reyes. I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved it as a draft and closed the laptop because before I involved the state, I wanted one more thing from Cindy, proof that given a fair chance to follow the rules, she chose not to. My whole career had taught me one lesson. Systems don't care who yelled loudest in the meeting. They care who shows up with the better file. And for the first time since that smug run for the board line, I realized something that made me almost smile. I wasn't the one on defense anymore. They just didn't know it yet. From that moment, I stopped reacting to Cindy's theater. I wasn't the audience. I was building the record for someone she couldn't talk over, bully, or embarrass at a podium. And with years of audits behind me, a state statute on my side, and a folder that was getting heavier by the day, I finally had what I needed to move from collecting paperwork to setting a trap. Because now, I wasn't just waiting on their mistakes. I was going to design the next one. Investigating them didn't look like a movie montage. It looked like me in sweatpants, under a ceiling fan, moving documents from one folder to another and breathing slow. So I didn't rush. Step one of the trap was boring on purpose. Give them one last clean chance to do the right thing and record exactly how they failed. I drafted a new request, stripped of anything emotional. Dear Board and Management, this is a renewed written request under Section 6, 3 of the bylaws and Arizona Revised Statutes section. Number, to inspect the association's financial records for the last 24 months. Specifically, I request 1. General ledger and bank statements for all association accounts. 2. All invoices, contracts, and correspondence related to the current special assessment and any consulting expenses. 3. Board minutes and approvals concerning the special assessment and selection of any consultants. 4. Any conflict of interest disclosures by board members related to these vendors. Please provide dates and times for in-person inspection within the statutory time frame. I sent it to the management company, CC'd Cindy, and saved the sent email and timestamp. Then I wrote one line in my timeline. Formal, detailed request sent. Clock starts. They had a set number of business days by law. I circled the deadline on my wall calendar in red. Every morning, before work, I checked my inbox, then checked off another day in my notebook. No response. On day 5, Kelsey from management finally replied, "Naomi, we received your request. Please note that pulling all those records will incur research and copying fees. Once you remit a $250 advance, we can begin compiling the documents." There it was, the paywall. No mention of the statutory cost limits. No itemized estimate. Just a flat barrier. I opened a new doc labeled obstruction and pasted the email in. My reply was 3 sentences. "Thank you, Kelsey. Please provide an itemized estimate consistent with state statute, including the per-page rate and staff time calculation. Upon receipt, I'll promptly remit any lawful amount. Please also confirm the date by which records will be made available regardless of payment, per statute." They'd either walk back the number or double down. Either way, it went into the file. 2 days of silence. Then Cindy herself jumped in. "Naomi, the board cannot divert unlimited time and resources every time a homeowner decides to play investigator. We are volunteers. We'll get to your request when time permits. In the meantime, the assessments are valid and payable. Thank you for understanding." No mention of the law. No dates. No estimate. Just pure, "we'll do it if and when we feel like it." I didn't argue. I printed the email, highlighted, "when time permits," and slid it behind the Records Request tab. Then the deadline I'd circled in red came and went. No inspection date. No documents. On my timeline, I wrote, "statutory deadline blown." Documented refusal. I underlined it twice. That's when I moved to phase 2, quiet evidence gathering from every angle they didn't control. First, I went to the county recorder's website. Our HOA's governing documents, amendments, and any recorded liens were public. In the CC and RS, I found the section that matched the bylaws: owners' rights to review books and records. Same language, recorded years before Cindy ever held a gavel. She couldn't pretend it was my interpretation. Next, I logged into the member portal and dug into every newsletter and budget summary they'd ever posted. They never showed full ledgers, but they loved pie charts. I screen capped each one, paying attention to how the professional services / consulting slice had ballooned in the last year. 2019, tiny sliver. 2020, bigger. This year, a fat, vague wedge eating into reserves. I laid the screenshots side by side on my screen, dates visible, and added them to the timeline as public representations to members. If the numbers in the real statements didn't resemble the pie charts, that was one issue. If they did, and consulting was still unexplained, that was another. But I still needed the internal view, the thing they thought I'd never see. The break came from an angle Cindy hadn't considered: sloppy redaction. About a week after they blew the deadline, a message finally appeared in my portal: documents available. No email, no apology, just a link buried 3 clicks deep. I clicked. What they'd uploaded was a half-hearted dump: a few months of bank statements, budget versus actual spreadsheet, and a PDF titled Invoices, Special Assessment. No cover letter, no explanation. They clearly thought volume and boredom would protect them. I downloaded everything to a fresh folder named HOA Raw Docs and started sorting. The bank statements were mostly as expected: deposits from owners, payments to the landscaper, pool service, insurance. Then, over and over, one vendor line jumped out: Soon Vista Community Consulting LLC, round amounts every month, even before the temporary assessment started. On the invoices PDF, Soon Vista appeared again and again, each entry with the same generic description: community image strategy, owner engagement planning, board leadership coaching. No scope, no hours, no deliverables. Just neat, even numbers. Most of the PDF had black boxes over contact info, like someone had tried to redact addresses and emails with a digital Sharpie. But whoever did it didn't understand how PDFs worked. I copied one blacked out email line and pasted it into a text editor. The text appeared clear as day. Contact Daniel Hallbrook, Principal Consultant, Daniel. Hallbrook at Hallbrook, Cindy's last name. I scrolled to the invoice header. In tiny print under the logo, mailing address, redacted street, Scottsdale, Arizona. I pasted that line into the editor too. The full address popped out. A quick online search later. And there it was, same address listed on a public LinkedIn profile for Dan Hallbrook, Community Strategy Consultant. His About section mentioned helping HOAs modernize their image. His recommendations included one from Cynthia M. H., a glowing paragraph about his unmatched insight. Primo, literally, the invoices stretched back 18 months, but the temporary special assessment, the one for Improvements Plus Consulting, had only started a year ago. For half a year before that, they'd been paying Soon Vista out of regular dues with no member vote and no disclosure. In the board minutes they'd grudgingly dumped, there was exactly one line about it. 8 months in. Motion by President Hallbrook to approve continuation of consulting contract. Seconded. Approved. No discussion. No note of her relationship to the consultant. No record of quotes from other vendors. No conflict of interest disclosure. I leaned back, letting the fan hum overhead, and added 3 new entries to my timeline. Consultant identified as relative of board president, public sources. Payments began prior to special assessment. Members told assessment was necessary for critical improvements plus consulting. No conflict disclosure or competitive bids in minutes. The trap was almost ready. All that was missing was one more thing, giving them a clean, obvious opportunity to either correct course or sink themselves deeper. So I drafted one last, extremely polite email to the board. I've reviewed the partial records provided, including payments to Soon Vista Community Consulting, LLC. Public records indicate a familial relationship between this vendor and President Hallbrook. For clarity and to avoid any misunderstandings, please confirm in writing. 1. Whether Soon Vista is owned or operated by a relative of any current board member. 2. Whether conflict of interest policies were followed in approving this contract. 3. Whether members were fully informed of this relationship when the special assessment was imposed. I read it twice, making sure there were no accusations, just questions that, if answered honestly, would be damning, and if ignored, would be even worse. Then I hit send and noted the time, because at that point, I wasn't just collecting what they did. I was watching very carefully what they chose not to say, and all that was left was to let them walk on their own a little further into the paperwork I was quietly building around them. If you're still with me watching this slow-motion paper war, make sure you're subscribed, because the next thing they did handed me the perfect evidence to pull a lever they didn't even know existed. The bait had to look harmless. Just another annoying process thing from the woman Cindy thought was playing auditor for fun. Her reply to my conflict of interest questions landed 2 days later. Naomi, the board has full authority to contract with qualified vendors at its discretion. Soon Vista has provided invaluable services to the community. Your insinuations are inappropriate. The board is not required to justify every decision to individual homeowners. Regards, Cynthia M. Hallbrook, President and Finance Chair. No answers, no disclosure, just indignation and a subtle scold. Perfect, I replied once. Thank you for confirming on the record that you declined to answer. Then I left her alone, because the next move wasn't for Cindy. It was for the people who held the other end of the money hose. I printed the most boring-looking things I owned, the bank statements with Soonvista payments highlighted, the invoices with the Hallbrook Cousins info recovered from under bad redactions, the minutes with no conflict disclosure, my timeline, my unanswered inspection requests, and Cindy's will get to it when time permits. Then I drafted 2 different packets. The first was for the state. I opened that clunky file a complaint page I bookmarked weeks earlier and filled in every box like I was clocking in association name and number, dates, statutes, attachments. I didn't rant. I wrote, homeowner requests records per statute. Association refuses or delays beyond deadline. Records provided show undisclosed related party contract funded by special assessment. Possible violations attached. I uploaded PDFs, hit submit, and watched the spinner turn. A case number appeared on the screen. I wrote it at the top of my timeline and underlined it. The second packet was quieter, but just as important. Our HOA didn't keep its reserves in a shoebox. They were with a regional bank, in an account titled under the association's legal name. I knew because the bank statements in my download said so right next to the routing and account numbers. Banks don't care about HOA drama. They care about risk, fraud, misuse of funds, regulatory headaches. And they especially care when someone hands them, in writing, a reason they might be holding an account that's under active investigation. I wrote a short letter to the bank's HOA/Association Services Department, using the address on the statements. I am a homeowner and member of HOA name whose operating and reserve accounts are held at your institution under account numbers ending in XXXX. I'm writing to inform you that I have filed a formal complaint with State Division regarding potential misuse of association funds and failure to comply with statutory records requirements. Attached are 1. Bank statements showing recurring payments to a vendor owned by a relative of the board president. 2. Invoices and minutes indicating no disclosed conflict of interest or competitive bidding. And 3. Correspondence evidencing the association's refusal to provide timely access to required records. I am not asking you to take any specific action, only to be aware that an investigation has been opened and to preserve all records related to this account. Preserve, not freeze, not close. Just that one word banks here like a fire alarm. I mailed it certified, signature required. The bait wasn't a threat. It was information, a neat little bundle tying their customer, the HOA, to words like investigation, related party, and complaint on file. At the same time, I did one last, almost petty thing. I emailed the management company, not Cindy. Hi, Kelsey. I appreciate the partial documents posted to the portal to ensure accuracy of your records. Please note that I've filed a formal complaint with State Division regarding the association's handling of records requests and its contract with Soonvista. I've included your correspondence in the documentation. Best, Naomi. No CC to the board. No italics. Just a quiet memo letting the paid professionals know the game had left the clubhouse. From there, I did nothing. I paid my next regular assessment on time. I walked past orange envelopes on other doors and nodded at neighbors. I sat at the next meeting in the second row, cardigan on, notebook open, looking for all the world like the troublemaker who'd finally gotten bored. The thing about paper traps is they don't snap with a dramatic click. They tighten slowly as each institution reacts in its own cautious way. And when the first sign came that they'd taken the bait, it didn't arrive in my inbox. It showed up in the one place Cindy thought she owned completely, right in the middle of her next big financial update, when someone from the management company cleared his throat, adjusted the mic, and told the room something that instantly wiped the smug off her face. When they announced what the bank had just done to our HOA's account, I knew the hook had set. because the consulting gravy train had finally hit a very cold, very bureaucratic wall, and the board had no idea yet how hard it was about to crash. When they marked that meeting as an emergency to address my case, I knew this was the stage where their own paperwork would wreck them, and I was ready for the fall. The emergency meeting notice hit everyone's inbox on a Thursday night. Special session, financial update, and delinquent accounts. It said, no Zoom option, in person only. You could smell the spin from the subject line. By Monday, the clubhouse was packed. Phoenix dusk glowed through the blinds, AC roaring against too many bodies. Folding chairs scraped tile. Cindy stood up front behind her folding table throne, board binder stacked on top of a glossy folder. Lipstick perfect, smile tight. She opened with the usual performance. As you all know, she began, your volunteer board has been dealing with disruptions caused by a very small number of owners refusing to pay lawfully assessed fees. Eyes slid toward me, then away. I kept my notebook open, pen uncapped, face blank. We've had to engage legal counsel, she went on, tapping the lawyer letter like a prop, which sadly increases costs for everyone. But your board will not be bullied by misinformation. She was building to something. I could hear it in her cadence. So tonight, she said, voice warming, we're going to clear the air and move forward as a unified community. She nodded to the property manager, a guy in a navy polo who usually just clicked through slides. He looked nervous. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. Before we get into the presentation, he said, I need to read a brief statement from management company name. Cindy's head snapped toward him. That wasn't on her script. He continued anyway. As of last week, upon notice of a pending investigation by State Division and a related inquiry from the association's banking institution, certain transactions from the association's operating account have been placed under temporary review. He swallowed. Practically, this means the bank has put a hold on non-essential disbursements until their review is complete. The room rustled. Hold, someone repeated. Like frozen? Cindy leaned into her mic, smile back on like a mask. That's just a technical review, she laughed lightly. Standard when some people file frivolous complaints. Our operations are not affected. The manager didn't smile. To clarify, he said carefully, eyes on the paper, vendor payments not deemed essential to life safety or core maintenance are temporarily paused. This includes discretionary contracts such as consulting services. There it was. A murmur rolled through the room like a wave. Consulting? You mean that big slice on the budget chart? Brian called out. The bank can't just do that, can they? Another neighbor asked. They can when they receive a packet showing undisclosed related party contracts funded by a special assessment. I said, still seated, voice even. Every head turned. Cindy's smile vanished. Naomi, you are out of order, she snapped. You have been spreading half-truths and harassing this board. I raised my hand, not to ask, but to hold up a thin manila folder. I sent the bank exactly what your own records showed. I said, invoices to Soon Vista Consulting, bank statements with matching payments, minutes with no conflict of interest disclosure, your emails refusing, in writing, to follow the inspection statute. A woman in the back frowned. Wait, Soon Vista, isn't that your cousin's company, Cindy? Cindy actually flinched. That is a disgusting accusation, she said. My family has nothing to do with. Public LinkedIn profile says otherwise. I replied calmly. Same last name, same Scottsdale address as on the invoices you tried to redact. Same community strategy, buzzwords you put in the newsletter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand to grandstand. I just opened the folder and slid a few pages to the edge of my lap where the first row could see an invoice with Soon Vista Community Consulting LLC at the top, the black digital marker over the contact text, and next to it, my printout of the revealed email address with Holbrook in the middle. Brian leaned forward, squinting. "You were paying your cousin with our dues," he said, louder than I ever would. "And then you doubled the fee to keep paying him?" "It was a professional engagement," Cindy said quickly, completely above board. "The board approved it." In a one-line motion with no discussion, I said, 8 months after payments started. No bids from other companies. No disclosure that the professional sharing your last name was also on your Christmas card list. Laughter, sharp and mean, broke from somewhere in the middle rows. Not at me. The manager cleared his throat again. "We, only learned of the relationship when Ms. Reyes's materials were forwarded to us and to the bank," he said, voice tense. "Our compliance department advised we cooperate fully with the state's review." "You went to the state?" Joanna whispered from the aisle seat, eyes wide. "I followed the process. I said, I asked for records. I documented refusals. The statute says what happens next." Cindy gripped the mic, knuckles white. "This is exactly the kind of vendetta that destroys communities," she said, one person with a chip on her shoulder. "And a file," I added, "don't forget the file." I reached into my bag and pulled out the accordion folder. The tabs fanned open, notices, emails, minutes, invoices, attorney letters. "You taped a final notice to my door calling me delinquent while my account was paid." I said, still level. "You sent foreclosure language over a disputed, unexplained fee. You refused a lawful inspection request past the deadline. Then you used that extra money to quietly pay your cousin's consulting company." Mrs. Patel, tiny in the second row, raised a trembling hand. "Is that why my bill went up?" she asked, voice thin. "To pay her cousin?" The room went dead silent. Cindy opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different angle. "You're misunderstanding how associations work," she insisted. "The board has fiduciary duty. The state investigator will decide what you misunderstood." I said, "The bank has already decided it needs to review your transactions. That's what the hold means." The property manager shifted, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "Until the review is concluded," he read from his paper, "no payments will be made under the Soonvista contract. Future special assessments are also suspended pending regulatory guidance." Suspended. You could feel the word land. "So my bill goes back down?" the young dad in the corner asked. "For now," the manager said. "Regular dues only until further notice." A low buzz of relief and anger mixed together. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Another, "All that talk about volunteers," while she skimmed for her cousin. Cindy's gaze darted around the room, calculating and coming up empty. Her binder, her mic, her carefully cultivated authority, none of it mattered against one simple, boring fact: the money spigot had moved out of her hands. "This is not over," she said finally, voice brittle. "There are legal nuances you all don't understand. I will be meeting with counsel. Minutes from that meeting will be subject to disclosure too," I said, "assuming you remember to keep them this time." Laughter again, louder. Not at me. I didn't smile. I just clicked my pen, wrote the words "account hold announced publicly" in my notebook with the date, and underlined it, because as humiliating as that moment was for Cindy, freezing the account and exposing the family consulting gravy train was only the first consequence on paper. And what came next was going to hit them where people like her feel it most, not in a meeting, but in their power and their pocket. If you've ever wanted to tell an HOA exactly where they can stick their bogus consulting fees, drop a comment, because exposing them in that room was just the beginning of what the paperwork was about to do to her. When the meeting finally broke up, people clustered in little knots, buzzing. Cindy bolted for the side door with her binder. The property manager trailed after her, phone already in his hand. I didn't chase either of them. Consequences don't show up in speeches. They show up in follow-up emails. The first one hit the next morning. Dear owners, the subject line read, temporary suspension of special assessment. They blamed a regulatory review for the pause, said it was out of an abundance of caution, and does not reflect any wrongdoing. The legalese was almost funny, but 2 sentences mattered. Effective immediately, the special assessment is suspended. Owners may disregard any past due notices related solely to this assessment until further notice. That was bureaucrat for. Everyone Cindy had been scaring with orange envelopes just got relief in writing. I printed the email, highlighted that line, and slid it into the Notices tab. 2 days later, another message. Board vacancy, president. No fanfare. No heartfelt goodbye. Just President Hallbrook has resigned from the board effective immediately for personal reasons. The board will appoint an interim president until the next election. Personal reasons. Brian knocked on my door, waving his phone. You see this? She bailed. I shrugged. Paperwork catches up to people. He snorted. You did this paperwork. Not exactly. I just pointed the right eyes at the right stack. The Real hit came a week later, in a letter on state letterhead addressed to all members of HOA name. It was dry like I expected, but brutal in its own way. The investigator summarized everything in 3 paragraphs. Failure to provide records within statutory timelines, improper handling of disputed assessments, and apparent related party transactions with inadequate disclosure. Then came the remedies. A civil penalty against the association, mandatory reimbursement of all collection, and notice fees tied to the special assessment. A directive to credit back any late fees that had been charged while accounts were in dispute. And my favorite line, the association shall not enter into future contracts with entities owned or controlled by board members or their immediate relatives without full disclosure to the membership and competitive bidding. Translation, the Cousins gravy train was over retroactively. In the Facebook group, people who'd been quiet for months finally spoke up. So those orange envelopes were bogus? Do we get our money back? I almost put my place up for sale over that collection letter. Management followed with yet another memo. Credits would appear on upcoming statements. Owners who'd already paid the special assessment in full could elect refunds or have it applied to future dues. They tried to frame it as cooperative resolution. The credits column on the next bill told the real story. Mrs. Patel knocked on my door that night with her statement in her hand, eyes wet. They are giving back, she said, finger on the new negative line. I don't understand all the words, but this means smaller? Yes, it means smaller, I said, and that they can't do that to you again without telling you exactly why. Her shoulders dropped like someone had taken a backpack off her. I prayed, she whispered. I thought no one listened. Someone had. A statute, a case number, a bank compliance department. At the next meeting, the tone was different from the moment we walked in. No glossy community harmony slide. No cousin invoices quietly slipping out the back door. The interim president, a guy who'd barely spoken before, read from a prepared statement about rebuilding trust, following best practices, and ensuring all owners' rights are respected. He announced a records access policy with clear timelines, cost caps, and a standing monthly slot where any owner could review financials with management. Then he said something I didn't expect. We're also forming a finance and compliance committee of non-board homeowners, he added. If you have experience with accounting, audits, or procurement, we'd appreciate your involvement. Half the room turned to look at me. I shook my head, slightly. I wasn't looking for a nameplate, but I did raise my hand once. Can we add one line? I asked that any future special assessment notice must include a plain English breakdown of where that money is going, vendor names, amounts, and duration, not just consulting or improvements? The interim president hesitated, then nodded. That's reasonable, he said. We can draft that. In my notebook, I wrote, policy change, disclosure baked in. On the way out, Joanna caught my arm. I thought you were just being difficult, she admitted. I didn't realize how bad it was. I shrugged. Most people don't until the paper shows up. She laughed, a little bitter. Remind me to never make you mad. You don't have to, I said. Just keep your receipts. Cindy didn't get marched out in handcuffs. There was no screaming match or viral video. She just stopped showing up. Rumor was she tried to blame everything on the management company. They'd quietly pointed to her signatures and the investigators' findings. Her cousin's LLC website went dark a month later. Life in the community didn't turn into a utopia. The pool's still closed sometimes. The landscaping crew still missed a bush here and there. People still lost packages. But the next time a fee changed, there was a one-page explainer with it. Numbers, vendor names, term lengths. Boring, honest detail. And tucked into the back of my file cabinet, under HOA closed, sat a fat accordion folder and a printed copy of the state's determination, just in case anyone ever pretended this was all a misunderstanding. From that day on, when someone new moved in and grumbled about HOA drama, older neighbors didn't shrug and say, that's just how it is. They pointed to the policy binder and said, it used to be worse. Then someone started asking for the records. If this story made you look twice at that vague fees line on your own bill, hit like, because the more people know how quiet paperwork can work, the fewer Cindys get to hide behind orange envelopes and fake consulting. In the months after everything blew up, the community didn't magically turn into some HOA utopia. The trash still got missed a day here and there. The pool filters still broke once in a while. People still forgot to pick up after their dogs. But something fundamental shifted that you could feel in tiny, quiet ways. The first time I noticed, it was at the mailboxes. A new neighbor, 20's laptop bag, earbuds around his neck, was frowning at his welcome packet. He flipped to the dues page and muttered, "Man, HOAs, here we go." Brian was at the next box over. Instead of shrugging, he pointed at the clearly printed fee sheet. "It's not perfect," he said, "but at least now they have to show their work. If anything looks off, talk to Naomi. She reads this stuff for fun." "Not for fun," I said, locking my box. "For survival." He laughed, but he didn't look hopeless. That was new. The bulletin board and the clubhouse changed too. The old delinquent accounts increase everyone's costs flyer disappeared. In its place was a laminated owner records access policy with bullet points, how to request financials, deadlines, per page caps. Someone had even added a plain English note at the bottom in blue pen. If you're confused, you're allowed to ask. I walked past Cindy's old reserved parking spot one evening, now just another unmarked space. Her board binder, Throne had gone to a soft-spoken guy who actually brought a calculator to meetings. No one gasped when owners asked questions anymore. Half the time, the interim president answered with, "We'll post the backup in the portal so everyone can see." I still kept my accordion folder, but it lived further back in the cabinet now. The newest section was thin, just routine statements. No orange or red ink, no lawyer headings. It was almost boring. Every so often, I'd see Mrs. Patel at the pool, ankles in the water, statement folded neatly in her purse. We'd sit together and go over it line by line. Now, when she found something she didn't understand, she didn't whisper like it was a confession. "They have this committee now," she would say. "If they try anything, we ask." I never joined the board. I didn't want the gavel or the title. I sat on the finance committee for a while, long enough to help write a conflict of interest clause in language even the tiredest homeowner could understand. If your family gets paid, you have to tell us, and you don't get to vote on it. After that, I stepped back to being just another name on the owner list. I still read the minutes. I still filed the important stuff. I still, out of habit, wrote dates and short notes in the margin when anything changed. Every now and then, someone would knock on my door with a crumpled notice from some other HOA across town, asking, "Is this even allowed?" I'd make tea, smooth out the paper, and we'd start where it always starts. What do the bylaws say? What does the statute say? What did they put in writing? Because that's the thing I learned in this little, sunburned corner of Phoenix. Power in these communities doesn't live in the loudest person at the microphone. It lives in the documents almost nobody reads, until one person decides they're done being embarrassed and starts highlighting. Freezing the account didn't feel like a movie ending. It felt like a quiet reset. Cindy didn't get a dramatic downfall. She just lost the thing she valued most, control over other people's money and the story they told about it. The rest was just maintenance of the pool, of the landscaping, and of the paper. And somewhere in another subdivision with beige walls and stock photo newsletters, there's probably another finance chair practicing the same smile, saying the same lines about fiduciary duty, and if you don't like it, run for the board, hoping nobody ever opens the attachments. That's why I tell this story the way I fought that battle. Slowly, in order with receipts. Not to scare you away from every HOA, but to remind you that you're never as powerless as they want you to feel, as long as you're willing to read the fine print, watch the deadlines, and file when talking stops working. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But for those who know the system from the inside, they know there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and watch the absurd